Racist cop punches. Elderly black woman. Puts her in a coma. Then panics when he learns who her son. A punch. An elderly woman. A red beanie embroidered with the words, "Be kind." And a society jolted awake from its sleepwalk through justice. This isn't just a story about a police officer abusing his power. It's a wake-up call for all of America. That even in the seemingly most peaceful places, apathy and racism can disguise themselves in uniform and strike without hesitation. Before we dive deeper into this story, let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your thoughts. 7:22 a.m. The sky above Westwood, Georgia, still clung to a faint veil of mist. On an old stone-paved sidewalk, Giselle Allen, 73 years old, stepped out of her house with a slow but steady pace. She wore a light gray cardigan and carried a faded cloth bag with a few children's picture books and a cinnamon loaf she'd bought the day before. Each item in the bag had a purpose: the books to read to orphans, the bread to share with her Sunday morning prayer group. Neighbors knew her as Sweet Ms. Giselle, the one who quietly swept leaves off other people's porches, never forgot to wish folks a blessed morning, rain or shine. But that morning held no blessings. A screeching brake shattered the calm. Patrol car number 421 swerved sharply toward the curb, nearly hitting a hibiscus bush. The door flew open. Officer Arnold Harris, 41, once decorated with a Distinguished Service Star 3 years ago, stepped out with a cold stare and clenched jaw. "You there, stop. What are you doing here?" Giselle paused, a little surprised but composed. "I'm walking to the bus stop." Harris's eyes scanned her like a spotlight searching for guilt. "What's that look like?" "Show me some." "ID," she replied gently. "I haven't broken any laws. I believe I don't need to." "You believe? Do you even know who I am? You address me as sir." The petite, silver-haired woman looked at him for a few seconds. Her eyes held no defiance, just honesty. "I don't call anyone sir unless they deserve it." Just one sentence. But to Harris, it was the ultimate insult. He lost control, abandoned reason. He raised his gloved right hand, still bearing the police insignia, and punched her directly in the face. Ms. Giselle was thrown backward, her spine slamming against a stone bench, her head crashing into the concrete wall behind the bus shelter. The crack rang out like a blade slicing open the morning air. She lay motionless. No one rushed over. A schoolboy, Mason, 9 years old, stood about 50 meters away, having just been dropped off by his mother at the school bus stop, and burst into tears at the sight of her collapse, red blood soaking into the tiled pavement. And Harris? He called for medical assistance, his voice chillingly calm. A female suspect fell while resisting an ID check. Possible head trauma. In the official report that followed, there was no mention of the punch, not a single line about what he'd said before it happened. When the ambulance drove away, the only thing left on the street was a red knit cap, rolling gently in a pool of diluted blood. White thread stitched 3 simple words: "Be kind." That hat had been a birthday gift from her 12-year-old granddaughter. She wore it every cold morning, not just as a keepsake, but as a reminder to herself never to grow bitter, no matter how cold the world became. But that morning, kindness was knocked to the ground, and no one said a word. It wasn't until the video surfaced that the nation's fury began to rise. And at that moment, no one, not even Harris, knew that the woman he had beaten into unconsciousness was the mother of one of the most powerful men in the U.S. military. She lay there, beneath the pale white light of the ICU, like a crumpled sheet of paper, still and silent amid a world spinning relentlessly. And only the doctors and nurses understood. That fragile body was fighting for every breath, resisting the pull of permanence. At Memorial Street James Hospital, one of Georgia's largest medical centers, Giselle Allen was rushed into the emergency unit at 7:52 a.m., just 30 minutes after being assaulted in public. The on-duty team initially believed she was a stair-fall victim, but when the CT scans reached Dr. Emma Salazar, every assumption evaporated. Traumatic brain injury, left hemisphere hematoma measuring 3.2 centimeters, swelling spreading into the temporal lobe. Left cheekbone fractured at an angle, bruises on the neck and shoulder, indicative of forceful constriction. These were not the result of an accident. They were consequences of a deliberate, forceful punch at close range. "This is the kind of trauma I've only seen on the front lines in Afghanistan," Dr. Salazar whispered to the head nurse, careful not to be overheard. And she wasn't wearing body armor. Mrs. Giselle was placed under controlled sedation, a specialized medical protocol to reduce intracranial pressure. Her survival odds, according to the emergency consult team, were estimated at less than 42%. Every hour, the brain swelling expanded by 0.3 millimeters. Every minute was a silent battle in the field of medicine. While the ICU team fought to keep her alive, a quieter development unfolded outside. The Westwood Police Department submitted an internal request, marking her case as a confidential patient, forbidding visitors and blocking all medical data access without direct authorization. A curious nurse attempted to check the database. Her account was locked for 3 minutes. A resident physician inquired about the emergency case from this morning and received only, "No such information exists." But at that very moment, when it seemed everything was being buried in shadows, the hospital's internal security system detected unauthorized access. A data stream from an encrypted IP address, traced to an eastern U.S. military security cluster, attempted to log into the file of patient G. Allen. The biometric software immediately scanned Giselle's face and tagged her with a Level 6 red alert, an identification level reserved for individuals linked to national security, typically relatives of those in the top-tier Special Operations Command of the Department of Defense. 3 alerts were dispatched to the Pentagon, to the Strategic Security Response Center in Quantico, and an unnamed unit in Langley. Within 11 seconds, a name appeared on the operations screen. Biological mother of Lieutenant General Lawrence Allen, Strategic Combat Commander, Special Forces, Black Phantom Unit. A military operator placed his hand on the receiver. "Initiate Origin Shield Protocol, Code 99. Elevate communications to priority threat level." Meanwhile, in room 16B, the 73-year-old woman had yet to open her eyes. Her eyelids were swollen and purple, the dried blood at her temple still not fully wiped away. But in her cardigan pocket, a nurse named Julian found a small item, a faded photograph of her embracing a young boy in a military school uniform, standing beside the American flag. The photo was dated 1989. No one in the room knew that the boy was now one of only 7 individuals in the U.S. military with the authority to issue direct action orders without congressional approval. And he had just been notified. "Your mother is in critical condition, and a city police officer may be responsible." Outside the hospital, a light rain began to fall. But no one knew that, within the next 24 hours, the entire law enforcement structure of a city would be shaken to its core. And a woman once thought invisible would force America to confront the truth in its reflection, in a place more than 1,600 miles from Memorial Street. James Hospital, a man clenched his jaw, heart pounding like war drums, not because of a military order, but because of a message just 8 words long. "Your mother, critical condition. Action requested immediately." 8:17 a.m., Colorado Springs. Inside the high-security conference chamber of the International Strategic Security Summit, Lieutenant General Lawrence Allen, 49 years old, commander of the 73rd Brigade, nicknamed Black Phantom, was quietly observing a NATO delegate's speech when the Epsilon M11 encrypted device in his breast pocket vibrated 3 times. No one knew that this device was only used for ultra-secure communications, specifically for matters involving the families of those authorized to deploy special combat forces without congressional oversight. He read the message, untitled. His eyes hardened, not a single twitch in his brow. Without a word, he stood up from the front row, gave a subtle diplomatic nod, and walked out of the room as if merely taking a call. But the Black Phantom deputy walking behind him knew. "We've got an emergency." At 8:39 a.m., a special H-60 Blackhawk helicopter lifted off from Peterson Air Force Base, carrying exactly 3 people: Allen, Senior Tech Advisor Briggs, and Battlefield Data Intelligence Analyst Harper. On the 3-hour flight to Georgia, Lawrence Allen did not sit still for a moment. The internal screen displayed 4 simultaneous data streams: Westwood Street surveillance footage, internal city police department reports, body cam metadata logs, and the disciplinary file of Officer Arnold Harris. "There are 17 formal complaints," Harper reported in an even voice. "Any prosecutions?" "Number all dismissed or not pursued. 9 of the complainants were black women over the age of 60. Allen said nothing. He simply stared at a paused frame, a tilted camera angle showing Mrs. Giselle walking, with Patrol Car Unit 421 braking hard behind her. At exactly 9:11 a.m., Lawrence gave the command, "Activate Black Phantom encryption unit. I want every video file deleted from Harris's device, fully recovered." Within 12 minutes, a team of 4 cybersecurity specialists at Langley received the directive. Using the SHA 927 overwrite recovery protocol, they began restoring the wiped data. The results left the entire team in stunned silence. The recovered footage revealed what had never been reported. Officer Harris struck Giselle a second time after she was already unconscious and unresisting. The blow caused blood to splatter onto Harris's uniform. A punch not to subdue. A punch to satisfy dominance. A punch that declared he believed no one would dare hold him accountable. On the mobile command desk aboard the helicopter, Lawrence placed a small object before him, a silver insignia engraved with the words, "Protect or perish." A gift from his mother the day he graduated from West Point, the most prestigious military academy in the nation. That day, she stood in the rain holding an umbrella, beaming with pride. If you can't protect those who have no one to protect them, then what's the point of wearing that uniform? Now, that same woman lay suspended between life and death, and there was a system, possibly an entire city, that had tried to bury the truth. Allen looked at his aide. "I don't want a local report. No DOJ briefings. Begin operations. All of it." "Begin what, sir?" "Operation. Mirror reflection. Make that entire city look at itself in the mirror." At 10:52 a.m., the sliding doors of the emergency wing at Memorial Street. James Hospital opened. No sirens, no entourage. Just a man in a dark blue suit walking in, carrying a leather briefcase, with a badge on his chest that read, "Ethan Collard, Federal Health Security Inspector." No one in the hospital, not even the on-duty director, recognized that the man who had just passed through the security system was Lieutenant General Lawrence Allen, one of only 12 active officers with clearance to access national strategic security directives. He didn't need an appointment, he didn't need permission, because his mother lay on the edge of life and death, and he would no longer allow anyone to control the truth. "Seal the entire ICU floor," Allen said, his voice deep, clear, and not needing to be repeated. Within 7 minutes, card access to the 9th floor, the location of Recovery Room 16B, was suspended to all outside personnel. An internal security team was deployed to stand watch around the clock, while the hospital sent an internal memo. Federal-level security protocol in effect. Absolute compliance is required. No communication with media, press, or local police. As doctors and nurses scrambled to make sense of the unprecedented lockdown, Alan walked slowly into his mother's room, where the only sounds were the soft beeping of a heart monitor and the steady drip of an IV line. He pulled a small piece of fabric from his left breast pocket, a faded beige handkerchief embroidered with the name Giselle in white thread. Through 9 years of deployment in Iraq, he had kept it in his pack, as a silent vow that his mother was always with him, even in the fiercest war zones. He placed it beside her hand, then leaned down and whispered into the ear of the unconscious woman. "Mom, if you wake up, I promise you, he will never sleep in peace again." That vow, recorded in the care log by the attending nurse, Marlena, whose hands were still trembling, wasn't noted out of fear. But because she understood, this general didn't waste words. 11:17 a.m. Alan convened a closed-door meeting on the hospital's technical floor. He demanded full access to personnel records, duty rosters, and internal complaint logs from the Westwood Police Department. First target, Arnold Harris. At the same time, from a sealed room in Langley, the Black Phantom Communications Unit initiated deployment, sending out data requests on anomalous media activity involving the Westwood Police over the past 3 years, activating the Citizen Feedback Archive, sorted by neighborhood, and most notably, launching a new campaign under the codename Operation Truthline. No one yet knew its full purpose, but those who had worked with Alan before understood one thing. When he initiated this operation, it meant silence was no longer an option. At exactly 11:43, Rylan Carter, deputy officer and longtime partner of Harris, received a notification. "You are temporarily suspended for 30 days due to suspected concealment of critical information in administrative reporting." Startled, he turned to his commander and asked, "Who ordered this?" The answer was short. Not the state governor. It came from the Department of Defense. Simultaneously, Alan dispatched an emergency subpoena through the military command network, requesting immediate access to Harris's personal data devices, camera equipment, and GPS history, overriding statewide jurisdiction under grounds of direct threat to a high-ranking family member currently hospitalized in critical condition. In the hospital cafeteria, the atmosphere began to shift. Staff whispered, their eyes fixed on the entrance to the 9th floor, now locked down and under strict guard. A nursing intern murmured, "Who is that woman to bring a general all the way here, without a single media camera in sight?" A physician quietly replied, "Justice isn't wearing robes today. It's wearing a uniform, and it doesn't speak, it acts." No one expected that the first voice to speak out would come from the media or a public official, but from an 8-year-old child. Mason Andrews, a 3rd grader, happened to be sitting in the 2nd row of bus 14 on the Westwood Elementary route that morning. As the bus stopped at the Parkview and Elm intersection, he pulled out his toy camera, which he'd attached to a phone, trying to capture the sparkly morning fog. But through the trembling lens, another image appeared. Ms. Giselle Allen collapsing face first onto the pavement after a brutal punch from a man in a police uniform. The video was only 7 seconds long. No sound. No clear face. But no one needed more details. When Mason's parent uploaded the clip to Facebook later that afternoon, it received over 300,000 shares in the first 3 hours. Then, reposted to TikTok and Twitter X, the video hit 1.5 million views within 12 hours. Under the dim frame of the recording, viewers couldn't see the blood. But the way Giselle crumpled, like a statue of kindness shattered in silence, was enough to tighten the hearts of people across America. The hashtag number Justice for Giselle began trending, climbing into the top 3 in the US. What no one knew, the first person to share the clip on Twitter was none other than General Allen, under a secondary account named @servant, still no caption, no comment, just one word: watch. Then came the tidal wave of memories. Tisha Scott, 24, a community care worker in Atlanta, posted a 2-minute video. Ms. Giselle was the only one who ever taught me how to read. I was an orphan. I didn't even know how to spell my name. She held my hand every winter morning, and her hands were always warm. And now, I just want those hands to be alive, to hold someone else one more time. An independent journalist named Elena Ruiz traced Giselle's records and uncovered. Over the past 5 years, she had spent her entire retirement fund, over $26,000, printing and distributing more than 3,400 free educational books for orphans, abused children, and kids from marginalized communities. The book series was titled, "Be the First Kind Person a Child Meets." She printed them herself, delivered them by hand. No newspaper ever reported it. She had no sponsors. That Tuesday afternoon, at the small church on Greenwell Street, where Giselle once taught Bible lessons to children, an impromptu prayer gathering was held. Though the chapel held only 120 seats, over 400 people came. Half of them had never met her. They'd only heard about her from someone else. Outside the hospital gates, dozens of handwritten letters were taped to the iron fence. "Ms. Giselle, you taught me how to write the letter A. You gave me crayons when my friends left me behind. Please wake up. People like you aren't supposed to leave this world like that." In a 1-minute video shared by veteran Frederick Dorsey, 70, he choked up as he said, "In 1997, I lost my wife and didn't want to live anymore. She, out of nowhere, brought warm bread to my house every Friday evening. No one told her to do it. If today she's beaten unconscious in the street and the whole society still turns away, maybe this world can't be saved anymore." Westwood Police Chief Clyde Beasley held a press conference on Tuesday. He said, "We will launch a full investigation." But when a reporter asked, "Sir, why was Harris's body cam missing data from that specific time frame?" Clyde stood silent for 14 seconds, then quietly stepped down from the podium. 72 hours after the incident, at least 11 major media outlets descended on Westwood: CNN, NBC, The New York Times, and Al Jazeera. But by the time they arrived, the people were already in the streets, holding banners, erecting posters of Ms. Giselle, with one large message written across them. She wasn't just a mother. She was the best part of us we're losing. 9:08 a.m. On the 4th day after the incident, the Special Legal Task Force led by General Lawrence Allen issued a direct federal subpoena to 2 individuals, Officer Arnold Harris and his associate, Rylan Carter. Citing the Civil Rights Act of 1964, specifically the provision against racial violence toward senior citizens, both were summoned to appear in federal court for abuse of power, assaulting an unarmed citizen, and tampering with evidence. At the same time, the internal archive system of the Westwood Police Department was breached. An anonymous account uploaded 4 audio recordings of internal conversations, in which Harris's voice was audible, filled with contempt, venom, and no possible justification. One of the clips that went viral captured Harris saying, "These old black folks, who taught them to stand tall like that, acting like they own the damn street." The person he was referring to wasn't a criminal. It was an elderly man handing out bread outside a church, where Harris had dropped by for a security check. Under mounting public pressure, civil rights attorney Camille Ransom, known for winning the Taylor versus Baton Rouge 2018 case, announced she would represent Ms. Giselle's family. In front of cameras, she stated firmly, "We are not just suing an individual, we are suing an entire system that allowed violent men to hide behind badges and the law." The Georgia State Human Rights Commission convened an emergency session. Within 6 hours, a leaked internal report revealed that Harris had been recommended for suspension at least 3 times over the past 7 years for the following allegations: threatening black minors in the Southview neighborhood, 2019; unlawfully detaining an elderly African-American woman, 2021; and using unnecessary force on a Parkinson's patient during an ID check, 2022. However, all 3 cases were marked as insufficient direct evidence and dismissed. A whistleblower from the department, interviewed anonymously by WXGA News, confirmed, "I was once asked to remove a disciplinary memo on Harris from the 2020 internal records. When I refused, I was reassigned to the records basement. No desk, no chair, no defined duties." Westwood residents began speaking out. Myrtle Lewis, an 82-year-old woman, shared on local radio, WGRZ. "I remember clearly. Officer Harris twisted my arm in a grocery store. I had only picked up an orange to smell it. He said I was attempting to steal produce. I cried for 2 days, and I stayed silent. But today, no more." And it wasn't just the black community. A white man named Ethan Calloway, a veteran, posted a comment that spread rapidly on Reddit. "I used to say, Harris is a good cop, a hard-working guy. Now I can't look in the mirror without feeling ashamed. I once trusted a man with hollow guts and a tongue laced in gunpowder." Journalists began digging into Harris's records from his high school years. One reporter from his alma mater found a 21-year-old piece of graffiti on a cracked concrete wall behind the gym. "Arnold the bully, never fit to protect anyone." A childhood warning no one noticed, now seen as a long-standing signal. Power and violence, learned young, walked hand in hand. As the truth could no longer be buried, the portrait of a community hero that Harris had once painted for himself began to fall apart, layer by layer. A new banner appeared outside police headquarters. They didn't just stay silent, they had his hand in their budget. The final mask fell, and for the first time in 19 years, Harris was seen not in uniform, but in a gray hoodie, hunched in an interrogation chair, his hands no longer trembling from rage, but from fear. August 12th, exactly 9 a.m., the United States District Court for the Southern District of Georgia opened the first hearing in a case deemed the litmus test for the character of American law enforcement. Outside the courthouse, the American flag waved silently, but inside, every gaze burned like a flame, waiting to witness justice. Arnold Harris, former Westwood police officer, appeared in light gray Fulton County Jail attire, wrists in steel cuffs, hair cropped short. No badge, no authority left. Reporters from major outlets, CNN, MSNBC, FOX, and EWS, BBC, REUTERS, scrambled for position. The court limited media to 50 seats, but over 230 press applications had been submitted, not to mention the hundreds of citizens tuning in to the live stream. General Lawrence Allen, dressed in civilian clothes, sat in the front row for the prosecution. His eyes locked onto the defendant. When Harris entered, their eyes met for 1 second. Harris immediately looked down and stepped back, as if that gaze weighed more than any verdict. The 23-page indictment was read aloud by federal prosecutor Etta Marshall. Harris was charged with 7 counts, including intentional infliction of serious bodily harm, assaulting an unarmed elderly person, abuse of official authority, falsifying criminal reports, destruction of public evidence, systematic racial discrimination, undermining public trust in the legal system. At the 43rd minute of the hearing, the body cam footage was played. The courtroom fell into such silence that the sound of a bottle cap being opened could be heard. In the clip, following Ms. Giselle's words, "I don't call anyone sir unless they deserve it," Harris swung his fist into her face once, and after she collapsed, he struck again, this time at her temple. Blood spattered onto the sidewalk. The entire court held its breath. The first witness, Elaine Ramos, 51, head nurse at Memorial Saint James Hospital, testified. "I was the first to reach the victim. Her mask was soaked with blood from her mouth and nose, but in the police report it said, 'Patient slipped and hit a wall.' No one reported the truth. An internal email from the Westwood Police Department was cited. 'This isn't serious. Not worth making noise. Log it as an internal warning case and don't let it leak.' Sent by the Chief Administrative Clerk, July 23rd, only 8 hours after the incident. Attorney Camille Ransom proceeded to present a list of 14 past complainants against Arnold Harris, submitted from 2015 to 2023. All were black individuals over the age of 55. A black woman seated near the back burst into tears and cried out, "My name is on that list. I filed a complaint. No one ever believed me. No one ever called back." The silence in the courtroom then wasn't from law. It was from the weight of unspoken guilt. Police Chief Clyde Beasley was called to the stand, asked directly by the prosecution, "Did you ever authorize or consent to the alteration of internal records related to Harris?" Clyde paused, then sighed. "I did. I trusted my subordinates. I was wrong." Immediately after, Federal Judge Adriana Lofgren ordered Harris to be placed under tight supervision by federal judicial security. All phones, computers, and notebooks from Westwood headquarters were to be seized. A full freeze was issued on all digital accounts linked to Harris, Carter, and 3 senior administrative staff. The session adjourned at 4:19 p.m., but the crowd remained outside. An elderly man held up a sign. "We didn't come to watch guilt be punished. We came to see justice stand." On Wednesday morning, in front of the United States District Court for the Southern District of Georgia, a high school student held up a handwritten cardboard sign. If Mrs. Giselle weren't the mother of a general, would she still be alive? That question went viral within just 45 minutes, not because of elegant handwriting, but because it pierced the most painful nerve of the entire system. Are we protecting justice or just protecting status? On CNN that evening, social analyst Dolores Amari stated, "How many black people have to be punched before it takes a general walking into a courtroom for the truth to be believed?" The program drew more than 2.3 million viewers on its first night. Within just 30 days of the incident, over 20 academic papers were published, from Harvard, Yale, to Spelman College, analyzing the case of Mrs. Giselle as a fracture point in the backbone of American justice. A law professor at Howard University wrote, "This was not just a punch. This was America punching itself in the face, and this time, the mirror didn't break. It reflected." A Pew Research survey conducted with 2,800 African Americans in the U.S. delivered staggering results. 86% said they do not feel safe interacting with police. 71% believed that if they were victims like Mrs. Giselle, no one would investigate. And 92% believed that today's justice serves the powerful, not the righteous. Responding to this outcry, a social organization in Chicago launched a campaign titled, "No Fame Needed to Live." They placed digital billboards in 12 major cities, displaying images of forgotten victims, those without generals for sons, without attorneys to represent them, only wounds and silence. On Broadway, a play titled Giselle, the Coma of a Country premiered. After just 3 nights, all tickets for the next 2 weeks were sold out. The performance contained no dialogue for the first 20 minutes, only the sound of an oxygen machine in a hospital room, and the stomp of military boots echoing across the floor. A critic wrote, "The woman in the coma isn't just a character. She's a symbol, a wake-up call, the conscience of a nation that's fallen asleep." At the third hearing, the prosecution unexpectedly displayed an old photograph. Giselle Allen, at age 27, standing at the front of a classroom at Woodland Elementary, where she had taught for nearly 15 years. The picture captured the moment she was reading poetry to 35 children, all wide-eyed, sitting upright. The courtroom stood and applauded. No command was given. No cue was called. It was simply an emotional tide. A judge wiped away tears. A cameraman forgot to adjust his focus. General Allen, more pursued by the media than a presidential candidate, maintained complete silence. When a CNN reporter tried to interview him, he said only one sentence before walking away. "I'm not silent because I'm a general. I'm silent because I'm a son." At high schools, churches, corner stores, and bus stops, handwritten notes began to appear, scribbled in marker. You don't need a uniform to be treated like a human being. A 10-year-old boy stood outside a supermarket and asked his mother, "Mom, if I'm not somebody's son, who will believe me?" That question hurt more than any verdict, and for the first time in years, America could no longer look away. One overcast morning in Westwood, a 52-second video recorded by a clerical staff member at the police department spread like wildfire. In the clip, a woman named Clara Henson placed her employee badge on the table, her voice trembling. "I once printed arrest warrants for the wrong people. I once stamped altered records. I once stayed silent. But today, I can't do it anymore." Within 3 hours of the video being posted, nearly 7,000 shares appeared under the hashtag #WeOrClaraAwakens. Many called her action the first drop that began to fill the glass of truth. Soon after, a series of open letters were posted on social media, not from celebrities, but from former students of Mrs. Giselle Allen. They were doctors, lawyers, social workers, engineers, teachers, each with their background in life, but all began the same way. "I was once a child who couldn't read, and she was the first person to pronounce my name correctly." Public pressure forced the Westwood City Council to break its silence. In a special meeting on August 27th, with a unanimous 13-0 vote, they announced a 40% cut to the operating budget of the local police force. That portion of the budget was redirected into the Education, Human Rights, Civil Equity Initiative, which includes scholarships, community training, and legal aid for the underserved. At the same time, a group of young Black adults, mostly former students of Mrs. Giselle, launched an app called The Witness. The app allows users to record and store evidence of police abuse anonymously through encrypted ID codes, shielding them from IP tracking. In just the first 5 days, the app was downloaded over 128,000 times. At an outdoor community gathering, another clip went viral. A 9-year-old boy named Malik gripped the microphone with both trembling hands. "She taught me how to write my name in white chalk. Today, I say her name out loud, so everyone will remember." The audience fell silent, then burst into applause. An old man cried in the shadows. The media dubbed her the woman without titles, who shook the foundations of justice. Her name graced the front pages of national newspapers, not for a position she held, but for the values she carried. A street artist in Atlanta sketched her portrait in charcoal. The image was printed on 8,000 t-shirts, with all profits donated to a scholarship fund for orphans in Georgia, a fund bearing her name, established by her former students. At Ashwood Park, where residents held a memorial with small candles and handwritten notes, A man in a gray shirt walked in quietly. No one recognized him at first, but then an elderly woman whispered, "It's General Allen." He did not speak. No cameras. No press. He simply bowed his head and placed a white flower in front of his mother's photo, Mrs. Giselle Allen, with the words beneath it. Taught with heart, departed in light. An elderly white woman with silver hair stepped forward. "Hello, General," she said, gently holding his hand, her eyes brimming. "I didn't know your mother, but I know she changed me." General Allen bowed his head and nodded slightly. He hadn't shed a tear since the incident, but in that moment, 2 tears traced slowly down his face. It was the moment the community stopped dividing into sides. No longer black or white, officer or civilian. Only truth remained, and gratitude, and a faith being reborn. That silence was no longer an option. On the official sentencing day, the entire nation held its breath. At the United States District Court for the Southern District of Georgia, Federal Judge Cecilia Monroe sentenced Arnold Harris to 28 years in prison, with no possibility of parole, no reduction for good behavior, and a lifetime ban from serving in any law enforcement, security, or judicial role on U.S. soil. The courtroom was so silent that the crackle of legal documents being adjusted could be heard. Then came a round of applause, not angry, not boastful, but like a long-held breath finally released after decades of suffocation. The Westwood Police Department was officially dissolved. In its place, a new force was created, the Giselle Civil Task Force, an order-keeping unit monitored by the community, committed to transparency, humanity, and accountability. All members were required to complete a 180-hour ethics training program and attend monthly public hearings, where any resident could ask questions or file complaints. At the same time, General Lawrence Allen, along with a group of former attorneys and legal experts, launched the Allen Fund, a legal aid foundation providing free representation for victims of racially motivated violence. In its first year alone, the fund processed 416 cases nationwide and brought to light 93 previously dismissed cases, despite most victims bearing clear physical injuries, previously written off as lacking sufficient evidence. At the intersection where Mrs. Giselle Allen was attacked, residents came together to erect a white oak memorial plaque engraved with the words, "No one is nameless, when their heart leaves behind light." And then, the unimaginable happened. On the 33rd day of her coma, at 5:17 a.m., Giselle opened her eyes. The head nurse later recalled, "Before we could celebrate, she spoke clearly. 'You didn't hit anyone for me, did you, son?' General Allen nodded, his eyes red with tears. 'No, Mom. I let justice do that.' 1 year later, without media, reporters, or politicians, just a quiet room at the Westwood Community Center, Mrs. Giselle Allen returned, teaching voluntarily as she had done for over 30 years. No one mentioned the case. No one called her a victim. Everyone simply called her what they always had, Ms. G. Dot. During her first class, a little girl named Jania walked in, placed her notebook on the desk and said, "Will you teach me to read? I want to learn the word." Justice. No one told that child to say it, but it touched the hearts of millions. A 41-second video capturing that moment spread across the world, translated into 19 languages, and became the opening footage in human rights courses at over 100 universities in the US, UK, Japan, South Africa, and Brazil. Mrs. Giselle's story didn't end with a harsh sentence. It didn't end with a public apology. It ended with awakening. And from that moment on, an entire generation, from students to mayors, from bus drivers to senators, began asking themselves, what is justice if it only arrives when the victim has a child wearing stars on their shoulder? A commentator wrote, "Some stories don't need dramatization because their truth is already too quiet and too loud. This is one of those stories." And if you've stayed with us until this very second, remember one thing. Silence is also a choice. But speaking up, sometimes, is the beginning of changing an entire nation. Something has begun to change. Join us in sharing powerful stories by liking and subscribing. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with deep lessons and sincere empathy.